Totally.
Okay, Chair Frank O'Donnell, everyone is in the room and ready to begin. Do you want to call the meeting to order, or would you like Vice Chair Sean Cross to call the meeting to order?
I can give it a try, and let me ask Sean, if I can't run it effectively from here, would you be comfortable taking over?
He says yes.
I saw the thumbs up. All right, I'm going to open the Urban Renewal Commission meeting of December 2nd. I'll open with a call to order and ask Katie to call the roll. Unless you want me to just sound them off. I can see who's there.
No, I'll go ahead and call the roll here. I've got Commissioner Doug Neely.
Yep.
He's here. We've got Commissioner Rachel Lyles-Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Vice Chair Sean Cross.
Here.
And then Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Here. So do we have any citizen comments tonight?
We do not have any citizen comments at this time.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to discussion item number 1, which is the Environmental Mitigation Bank. Do we have a presenter on that issue?
It's City Manager Tony Conkle.
All right. Please proceed, Mr. Conkle.
Okay, evening, Urban Renewal Commission. So at our last meeting, we talked about the environmental mitigation banking, what that was, a little bit of the history that we had worked with RestoreCap, had entered into a letter of interest to do the feasibility work, that where RestoreCap would do the feasibility work to determine if a mitigation bank was feasible, economical, at the Cove property. That agreement was for 1 year. So essentially we agreed to allow them to have 1 year to do the feasibility study. That feasibility study did not happen, or that agreement ended up lapsing without any additional agreements coming from the work, that if there was any work that had happened. So this was brought back, and the Urban Renewal Commission at the last meeting had some discussions about it. There was a presentation from Mr. Herman, Mr. Runyon. We provided the original water quality study that we had done, looking at habitat study that was done looking at the Cove. And so, there was a request to bring this back to have a discussion about what would the Urban Renewal Commission like to do. We're currently engaged in a public engagement process, which is focusing on what becomes of the Urban Renewal District. Does the Urban Renewal Commission want to move forward with entering into or investigating an environmental mitigation bank at the Cove, or not, until after the public engagement process is over? If the decision is that yes, this is something that we would like to move forward with, then the question becomes, do we re-engage with RestoreCap to see if they're still interested in this work at all? Or do we put out something similar to a request for qualifications and see what kind of interest that we could get back for some type of environmental mitigation banking program? And one of the questions received was, how does this timing of entering into this agreement, should we make that decision and should we get to a place where we could enter into an agreement? The original agreement that we entered into with RestoreCap, essentially, they took on all the costs of doing all the due diligence work within that 12-month period. So the Urban Renewal Commission's responsibilities role in that agreement was that we would not sell or lease out the properties that were being studied for 12 months. So we gave RestoreCap the 12 months to look at those areas. And then we would provide all the materials that were requested. So if we had information about dredging that had happened, or if we had information about some test pits that were done, then we would provide that information to them so that they could incorporate that into their due diligence. RestoreCap would take on all the financial liability and responsibility to do all the necessary environmental studies. So RestoreCap would essentially, I would imagine, I don't know the exact answer to this, but I could imagine where they are subcontracting out work to do the environmental studies, or to do the feasibility, or to look at the dredging, or to look at the habitat, to do some of the core sampling that may be necessary. I think it just depends on what comes with their due diligence, is where they would bring in additional subcontracts to do that work for them. If, as part of the original agreement with the Restore Cap, it was non-binding in terms of, once they did all their due diligence, and if it was financially feasible and economical, they would then, we agreed to negotiate in good faith and using our commercial best interest to negotiate an agreement for either a purchase or a lease of the area that had been identified as feasible for mitigation banking. And so, it's a multi-step process that we're gonna have to step through here. One is the feasibility component of it. And then depending on what the results of that are, then you get into a negotiation of how are the profits shared? Is it a lease? Is it a sale? Do we take a lump sum up front, or do we take a lump sum as part of the profits on the back? So I think all of that gets negotiated as part of the results of the initial feasibility study. So I'm not sure, Commissioner Lau-Smith, I think there was a question about the timing of this. And so I'm not sure if that's answering the question you had.
Chair, if I may respond.
Please do.
I think it does, but there's already a feasibility study that's been done. So, but we think we need to do a new feasibility study?
The feasibility study that we did looked at the water quality and the habitat. It was really a baseline study. What Restore Cap is really looking at is, our feasibility study didn't go to the state agencies. We didn't go to Department of State Lands and say, if we did this wetland project, would it be eligible for one of the levels of mitigation banking opportunities? So that work still needs to be done. We did no designs of in-water work or upland work. How would we redesign this? Would it qualify for DSL credit? Would it qualify for some of the federal credit? What is the permitting process? So really ours was kind of the baseline. Here's what the existing condition is out here. And yeah, there's some opportunities, but not to the level to determine whether it's economically feasible to actually be a mitigation bank.
And can you clarify when you say, we've been talking generally about the Clackamas Cove and the property. Are we clear on which pieces of property are part of this?
I think that would be a negotiation point that we would,
Okay.
because when we entered in this before, it was a three-party agreement, because we had development of the Cove
Right.
Apartments going on, right? So there were components there that were obviously going to be part of the development, so they couldn't be considered for wetland mitigation banking. And specifically, there was what we called Tract A, where we actually recorded an easement along the edge of that, which allowed for habitat restoration within that 100-foot easement. But then we sold the rest of the land that we've since gotten back.
Right.
So I think that, the original proposal to build something there, if we're not building something there, maybe that whole lot becomes accessible. I think those are things we just need to work through to see if it's even feasible. So generally, we could just say, here's what we did last time. We've identified those areas on a map of where we're willing to consider a lease or a sale, and say, this is what it is. Or it's like, hey, okay, things have changed now. So we're willing to look at some different areas.
So how I would like to proceed tonight, and let me make you aware, I cannot see input people raising their hands in the commission meetings. I can see those who are attending remotely if they raise their hands. So is right. I was going to, would the preference be for the board, the Urban Renewal Group, to ask questions initially, or to get any citizen input if there is any?
I have a question of Tony.
Please do. Proceed, Mayor.
My understanding is when that development went away in terms of the developer itself, that we still own the plans essentially. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would include the easement situation plus the land that was part of the development site.
The easement plans. I have never seen work product from Restore Cap.
Oh, no, I'm talking about
The
our.
Cove LLC.
Yes.
Right, yeah. I think there's been some, I think there was, when we terminated the agreement, there were outstanding plans that we've not received. There is some, so that's been an issue. So we have some, we do not have everything from the last proposal.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions of Mr. Conkle from commission members? Okay, seeing none, what I'm going
Excuse
to
me,
do
Mr.
is-
Chairman.
Oh,
Yes,
go ahead.
sorry. I know you couldn't see me raise my hand. I apologize. I guess where I am falling out on this particular project is that I appreciated the city manager's overview because one of my questions was, well, what would be the financial commitment that we would have to make? I guess the other question I have is that you said that they did all of these studies, or they haven't started any of those studies that they were supposed to do within the year? Is that what you're saying? Are they,
I don't have the status of
We don't
how
know,
much
okay.
work Restore Cap did or did
okay,
not do.
well, that would have been, yeah, that was one of my questions was, what was the amount of work that was done during that last time frame?
I will say that we as staff were not engaged by them. So if work happened, it did not include
Us, okay,
information from us that I'm aware of.
okay. All right, well, that was my
And the answer to-
two questions right there.
What was your financial question, was that answered?
No, he sort of answered it by saying that at this point, the way the agreement was structured last time, Restore Cap took the financial burden. I don't have any, I think that the work needs to be done. I think there are a number of questions that we need to have answered with regard to what work was completed, if there was any, and what work still needs to be done before I could make a final decision. And then I think the biggest thing would be whether or not there would be any financial outlay. I think at this point in time, we've committed to not really spending any project money or anything that would involve spending money on a project other than this urban renewal education. And I kind of want to stay kind of within that box. But I do think that the work down there and getting things set in motion is important. It's just a matter of the timing.
Okay. Well, I'll join the commission in posing a question. I want clarification on, there was a provision in the previous arrangement that said we would not lease or sell any properties. Is that referred just for purposes of a mitigation effort, or to actually to proceed with building if we so desired?
Yeah, so that was one of the complicating, so we ended up with the previous agreement identifying on a map the areas that were excluded from lease or sale because we were concurrently negotiating sales of multiple lots of which mitigation would have been on. So does that, so with the previous agreement, we specifically identified the areas that were excluded from future lease or sale during the agreement period. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and my thought is, having been involved with this over the previous 4 years, I would be comfortable moving forward with that assumption that those same areas would not be eligible for this. But you remember when we engaged in that, whatever it was, Lot A and the other one behind the Firestone store, I would actually allow those to be part of it because we have ownership of those with no other ties at this point. I think before we proceed, is there anyone either attending remotely or in the audience tonight that wishes to comment?
Yes, that we do have 2 citizen comments to partake in this particular agenda item. So I have Jerry Herman, if he could please step up to the mic.
And what time limitations are we imposing on input tonight, Katie?
We have 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Okay, I'll rely on you.
And Jerry, if you could please just begin by stating your first and last name
Yeah.
and city of residency for the record.
Yes, my name is Jerry Herman. Date of birth, you want that?
No.
That's okay. They do that in the doctor's office all the time. And I live in Gladstone, Oregon, okay? And thanks for hearing this discussion again. The whole thing seems complicated, but be honest with you, it really comes down to 4 years ago, the city looked at this concept, Restore Cap was brought in to try to figure out how they could make it happen. Mr. Runyon has been involved as a professional. I'm not a professional in this field. I'm just the messenger, trying to make sure that the opportunity for the Cove to somehow come together in whatever form you like happens. And my other part is I'd like to see, of course, the habitat values of that area really restored, recognizing it's an industrial quarry and very seriously affected lands. So Mr. Runyon, I think, was trying to get in tonight on a Zoom call. I don't know if he made it or not, but he informed me today. He said it's all about being in the queue. He said now ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, is coming in with a request for major funding of mitigation projects they need. Gladstone, as you're aware, received a significant amount of funding, and then Milwaukee's now in the queue. And the long and short of it is even West Lynn is beginning to show an interest, and Lake Oswego. So after 4 years of at least looking at the concept, my feeling would be, and I know you want to complete your, perhaps your review of the urban renewal strategies that you want to impose, this really allows a deeper look at what's feasible in the Cove. Doesn't have to be done in conjunction with urban renewal or urban renewal funding. It's mostly self-supporting, as you heard from Mr. Conkle. And by the way, the land stipulations in that agreement originally were that during that period, that lands would not be sold because they're studying them. But afterwards, those lands could be sold if that was required of the city's desire to do that. So it isn't like the whole process of being held up forever of selling lands that you might have some interest in selling in the future. It was during their study time. Somebody has to assure that they're not wasting their time studying lands that would be in the next 6 to 8 months sold for some development purpose. My belief is the Cove, I come back to this fundamental thing, is a highly degraded area. It's not Lake Oswego. It's not the kind of quality that Lake Oswego is in terms of being, it's in the floodway, the floodplain and all the rest. It has potential for great economic development and return for your community. But to say that every inch of it would be developed all the way around the perimeter, I don't think is anywhere feasible economically or legally because of flood restrictions and all that. And I think this approach allows the agencies that would affect any project you do in the city to get on board, any river-based project in particular, Clackamas Park, things like that, improvements you might want to make, to be a part of a consortium right now that could help bring not only the Cove project into some dimension of completion, whether it's, you know, more park-like or more development-like, whatever your desires are. Those agencies being on board because of this process means that you have a chance to get them in the queue also and being support of city endeavors that are so heavily regulated now by environmental law. So I would encourage you to think about some method to do this initial work of the mitigation bank process through the city. You don't have to do it through the Urban Renewal Commission. Certainly you're the people that make that decision or making that recommendation, but the city can serve as that mitigation bank in conjunction with Restore Cap's efforts, as Tony described. So that's my suggestion is let's not waste this opportunity because others are in the queue and looking for those support dollars, and they're very substantial. Thank you.
Mr. Herman, the chair has a question for you before you conclude. Of the communities you mentioned that are currently engaged in this mitigation, is Restore Cap the provider for all of them, or is there a variety of companies engaged?
I don't know the answer to that. Restore Cap's involved in Milwaukee, I know that. And then I believe, my understanding is, as Mr. Conkle had suggested in one of your options, ODOT is putting out an RFQ, request for qualifications, to help them get access to these very substantial funds to help them with project mitigation needs they may have. So obviously, there's other parties besides RestoreCap that do this kind of work.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do we have another speaker that wants to?
Chair,
I'd like
I
to
think,
ask a question
yeah.
after his presentation
Oh,
here.
please.
The Urban Renewal Agency owns that cove, is that not right?
Correct.
So I still think it's probably the Urban Renewal Agency, but of course, Tony can correct me, but not the city that's going to be the agency that's going to have to be dealt with. Is that right?
Currently, yes, unless there was some transfer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the other cities that you've mentioned, Jerry, that have gotten into the queue, have they gotten into the queue with some kind of a semi-specific project in mind?
The cities I mentioned have definite projects in mind. In the case of Milwaukee, they have Kellogg Creek in its basin. I don't believe Milwaukee has an urban renewal agency interacting on that project. They're doing it directly through the city again, through the city process. In the case of Westland, there's an interest with an area called Cedar Island, about the same size, open water, not quite, as Clackamas Cove. And I'm not sure what Lake Oswego is doing. They're kind of restricted as far as their direct connection to the river. However, they have many upland areas and wonderful aquatic, shall we say, wetland type settings where they can see the benefit. Anything draining to the Willamette River, below the Willamette Falls, any stream, any creek, any river, all are eligible for enhancement efforts. I can tell you right now, Canby has an interest in doing this, but they're above the falls. Their approach would be to do it with other kinds of credits that are in the works, in the pattern to be used for wetland mitigation. They would like to see 100 acres of new wetlands built to polish off all their water coming out of their sewer plant into beautiful park type settings. So,
Jerry,
All right,
I got to clarify my question. In order to get this, do we have to have a semi-specific project in mind for the cove? Not that we want the cove to be involved in this, but that we have some knowledge as to, do we have to have some knowledge to seek those funds as to what would be done?
everything I heard from Mr. Runyon and others, I've been involved in this thing at the Cove for some time, and many of you have too, is the water quality is number one. You've already spent $50,000 on studying the quality. There's ways to really make the water quality get resolved through the mitigation process. Upland areas around the edges that are not going to be suitable for development unless you want to build a pyramid to elevate the land up to the height of Highway 99E. Those areas are very eligible for fishing and recreation trails and things of that nature. So to answer your question, the entire perimeter of the cove is suitable, and the water quality within it has to be addressed someday, or you will not have a project. Lake Oswego had big problems with pollution, and they spent a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to solve those problems so that those lakeside residences would not go away.
Are there any other questions of Jerry from the commission?
No.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I will comment that in the preceding effort with the Cove, I remember when the water quality became an issue, and I remember making the comment where the portrayals were Blue Lagoon, when actually there were some very challenging issues down there. So I think at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up for discussion. Oh, we have one more. Do we have another person?
Yes, we have William Gifford.
There is stability in the world. Mr. Gifford.
Mr. Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And I'm a simple guy, and I've got a simple perspective on this, and maybe it's too simple, and I just need more clarification. It seems to me as though we have two issues that are somewhat related, but not totally dependent on each other. One is the quality of the water in the cove, that I think that everyone would agree is important for a lot of reasons, and has merit on its own for cleaning up, regardless. The fact that we have, I'll use the word agency, that has buckets of money that they're willing to give us, it seems to me as though it would be foolish for us not to at least ask them for it. The other issue is urban renewal or development of the area around the cove. And it seems to me as though those two issues could really stand on their own. The development on the cove would, of course, be enhanced by better water, but whether it gets developed or not, it seems to me as though we want to enhance the quality of that water, whether we do the development or not. It's not clear to me as to why the two of these are so closely entangled, other than the ownership of the property, and yada, yada. I remember seeing a cartoon years ago about a group of people attending a climate change conference. Hundreds of people in the audience and stage, and one person was standing up and said, wait, says, what if all of this is just a hoax and all we wind up with is a cleaner planet? Which I thought was really funny. And I'm wondering, gee, what if all of this, maybe the development's never going to happen, but at least we could ask for some money to help clean that water and get some sort of a refreshing solution to it. And so that's my comment. Not too sophisticated, but I hope that these two don't get too entangled.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford. And from another simple mind, I agree with you. They're independent events and one can move forward without the other, would be my input. So I do agree with what you said.
Yeah.
Having heard our citizen, Mr. Neely, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would like to comment. The water quality of the cove became degraded over about a 4 or 5 year period. The water quality was very good when the tidal waters could freely come off of the Clackamas and flow back out. The gravel bar that's formed there has restricted it. And that's when we've had the blue-green algae blooms and so forth. But they used to have triathlons where people could swim across the cove. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that bar is a major problem to the water quality. And I was talking to Richard Craven. Now, Richard Craven is a person that was a consultant to the city that got a permit to actually move gravel off that. The city never implemented the permit. But we were talking last night, I called him specifically, and we recollect John Runyon was talking about having a inflow of water from the Clackamas River into the cove and then go back to push the waters out. And we don't believe there's a single state agency that would approve that. And the reason is this happens in the summertime. The cove water is warm. If Clackamas water flows into the cove, it's going to come out warmer than it did when it went in. And cold water is the major concern of the Salmonids. The waters have to be cold. So I'm a little bit concerned without having a concept ahead of time of how we're going to do it. And I don't mean a plan specifically, but what's possible and what's not possible. I'm a little bit worried in proceeding in this direction. And keep in mind, that's my interest and background. I was a statistician for fisheries programs. Natural resource area is my concern. I'm the chair of the Great Oregon State Watershed Council. So I want that water quality, don't misunderstand me. But I don't want a proposal coming forward that the state agencies are going to throw right out at the very beginning.
I would say, based on my experience over the past 4 years, that your comments are well taken, and simply because there is some controversy over whether a simple title exchange, which is currently prevented by that gravel bar, is sufficient to cleanse the waters. There was some talk about a perforated pipe entrance at the top, which we know that the difficulties that poses with fish and wildlife and Andromedas and migratory fish. I certainly agree with your comments, and I don't know if there's widespread agreement that a simple title exchange cleanses the cove, but that's not the discussion tonight, but I think it was timely to just give it a mention. Are there others present within chambers that I can't see that wish to speak? Okay, I see none. I'm gonna just open it up for general discussion. Is there any general discussion? And the question at hand is, should we proceed? Should we have Mr. Conkle proceed with a discussion? And should that be simply with Restore Cap, or should we go out for a request for proposal? And what do we want him to investigate? And I think that would include financials and the extent, whether it be a limited or expanded investigation of mitigation within the cove. So with that preface, I'll open it up to any input within the commission chambers. I see Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Well, because this does not require a financial expenditure at this time, and Restore Cap is the one that's willing to, if they're willing to come into an agreement and do due diligence and spend money and time on it, I have no problems moving forward with Restore Cap, drawing up a new agreement that meets our needs and letting that due diligence happen, letting them talk to state agencies and federal agencies and figure out good project areas, or if there would be a good project area as a mitigation. I'm hoping that during that period that they could address Commissioner Neely's concerns about having a specific project. And I would assume they would do that in order to, they wouldn't want to proceed with purchasing or leasing the property if they didn't feel like they could get a project that would work. So I consider this kind of a first step. And if they're interested, I have no problems moving forward. Partially because, like I said, there's no financial requirement. At least I don't believe there is at this time.
I think it'd be staff.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
The other piece of it is that regardless of where we end up in the spring with the urban renewal, if we decide that we're going to close the district, it's not going to happen overnight. So we're not going to magically say, we're going to be able to close it in a matter of, I don't believe the timing of that will happen like within weeks. And so therefore, I'm not concerned about a timing overlap with this. I think this conversation plays into the whole conversation, and it would be interesting to hear what Restore Cap has to say, because it will help us finalize and move forward with the urban renewal district once we complete our study. So I'm supportive of moving it forward and with Restore Cap.
Motion?
Well, I think there's more discussion.
Do we have any other input? I see Commissioner McGriff's hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair O'Donnell. I agree with what Commissioner Lyle Smith said, except for the fact that I would like to have my questions answered with regard to what they have done, if there is anything that they have done, and I would like to get some general idea of what else they see needs to be done. And I wouldn't be asking the city manager to enter into an agreement. I mean, obviously, one of the big critical points for me is communication. And we didn't have any the last time, and I would not proceed with being in any sort of an agreement with anybody unless there was regular responses to the city and regular updates and those sorts of things. So that's where I fall on that particular issue. Other than that, I'm fine with moving forward.
Are there any other inputs from commissioners present in chambers that I cannot see? Mr. Cross.
Yeah, I think it's a great worthwhile project, and I think looking at the feasibility would be great. I don't know if Restore Cap would be the one we want to go with. If the agreement's been expired for almost a year, and it was signed a year before that, so it's almost been 2 years, we haven't really heard much from them. The other thing is, I think we really need to do the engagement process first. I know we can do them at the same time and it's not costing anything, but I think it's the perception that you get, the public will perceive if we're moving along doing things in the urban renewal agency, but yet we're supposed to be looking at this engagement process to see, do we even want to keep it open? I think we really can close the district down pretty quickly because all the debt's paid off or will be paid off very shortly. And that's really what keeps the urban renewal districts open after all the projects are done is it's the debt payment. It could take 10 years to pay off the debt, but the debt's paid. So I don't think it'll take that long at all to show. It won't be weeks, it'll be months or a year, but it will be very quickly and compared to other urban rural districts that have done this. But I think it's more the perception of doing anything at the same time that we're supposed to be going out and engaging the public on if they still want to do an urban renewal or not.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
I think I agree with that point. My other concern would be, the staffing piece of it, and whether or not, in the past, when we were, asked by the citizens to kind of stop spending urban renewal funds, we kept those very separate. And so if urban renewal funds are being used for staffing for this, that kind of insinuates a project, and it kind of, is something that which is part of why we're doing this whole process, urban renewal process, to see what the public wants us to do moving forward. So I think that does throw a wrench into it if we're, paying staff to do work that's urban renewal related, and we haven't really gone through that process, decide what urban renewal is going to be.
I just want to clarify, so there's a lot of discussion about staff and what we're paying for, right? So we take an estimate of what my time is.
Right.
What James' time is. That's in the budget, so it's not like we're direct billing to the agency. The staff cost that I would imagine would be attorney related to any negotiation. So I don't want there to be this, there are, I'm budgeted, paid out of the urban renewal district to be the executive director for the urban renewal district. So there is staff time being paid for right now as part of this. The cost that I see, is any external attorney work that we need.
Yeah, but Tony, keep in mind, that's been my problem all along, which is why I voted against the budgets. So
understand.
I voted against the budget solely because of that. I don't think we should be doing that.
Okay, anybody else present within chambers? And I don't see anybody remotely that wants to provide input. Is there any other input within chamber?
No.
Okay, then seeing none, I'm going to speak. I feel that it's a win to proceed, and if nothing else, it increases the value of the property by knowing that if we do discover there's credits that become available to whatever we choose to do with it in the future. I know in speaking with the number one opposition to the way urban renewal has been conducted, that those very people are supportive of a project-based effort. And this is one of the things they actually would support to get this up and going, to do something with the cove. And this is good background work, and I've spoken to the individual directly in the last few days. I feel that this could move forward independently. It enhances the value of the property. If we do resolve our other issues and decide to move forward, it's another stone that we put behind us that we can advance and move forward. I think if I were to propose a motion myself, which I don't believe I can as chair, it would be to direct Mr. Conkle to proceed with initial discussions with Restore Cap because of the extent of the work they've done. If you read the reports, and because of their familiarity, and he could do the discussion about what's the extent of what we're talking about with them. He could place the limitations on our financial exposure. What components of the property would we be talking about, and what would be excluded? And I think what it does is it positions us to move forward. I honestly feel that we should accomplish something, and I'll say it again, a project-based effort is not opposed by the primary people that normally you hear from that are in opposition to urban renewal. So if someone has a motion or wants to discuss further, please make it or make your statement.
I'll go
I see
ahead.
nothing.
I'll go ahead and
Okay,
make
I'm sorry.
Yep, I'll go ahead and move that we move forward with having the city manager engage with Restore Cap to find out how we could be involved in a project with them, subject to obviously answering all those questions that many of us had. That wasn't elegant, but it gets the point.
It'll suffice. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
No?
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Doug Neely, Commissioner Sean Cross,
Aye.
and Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. That being done, we can move on to discussion item number 2, which is an urban renewal public engagement process update. If you would direct me to the presenter for that, Katie?
Yes, it's going to be James Graham.
Okay, Mr. Graham, I see you're attending remotely, I believe.
Yes. Good evening, members of the Urban Renewal Commission, City Manager, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Graham, Economic Development Manager, Oregon City. Today, it's my pleasure to present Sam Brookham and Anis Metes, that are our consultants, to present a report to you. Keep in mind, this is simply an update on the public engagement process. There is no action requested at this time. So I will turn it over to them.
Mr. Brookham,
James.
you speak? Okay.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. I will run through just a few slides here. I'll try and keep it brief. I know we haven't got a lot of time. That's okay. Is the host able to share my screen? If not, that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead now. You should be able to.
Okay, wonderful. Hopefully, can people confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So we're right here in December, kind of the second half of our engagement activities, so to speak. We've been focusing largely we're going to break it up into phases. The first phase has really been educational and soliciting some pretty high level feedback. So we've just wrapped up with the stakeholder interviews with the overlapping taxing districts. And you should have received a summary memo for those. The one outstanding one was recently completed with Clackamas Community College, and so there'll be a couple of updates there. I'm supposed to say 6 town halls. As you all know, we are about halfway with the town hall events. We've had 3 thus far, and another 3 coming, one of which is tomorrow, and a couple more within the next 2 weeks as well. So we'll have those wrapped by the holidays. On Monday, this coming Monday, we have a meeting scheduled with DOCA and Chamber of Commerce, joint meeting there, where we'll be having a community presentation. And then sometime in the new year, we're thinking perhaps late January, perhaps February, we'll have our second community workshop. So that's a summary of what I just said. There's a couple of things there that we've been discussing internally, where perhaps in January we're hoping to schedule an extended work session with you all outside of these standing meetings. At some point in time in the near future, once we have all of these, the vast majority of these events wrapped up, we'll want to sit down with you remotely to basically workshop and weigh up some options and kind of decide on the analysis and the options going forward. So please look for something in the not too distant future. That will largely inform the kinds of things that we bring forward, say in that community workshop as well. So I won't dwell on this too long because it's largely in the memo that you have. But I think it's important just to reiterate that for our conversations with the overlapping taxing districts, none of them really expressed a desire to see the districts closed, but there is a number of nuances to that. Obviously, most indicated desire for a greater return on the investment. There tends to be a little bit of a difference in support, or the level of support between staff and board members. There is some interest in having urban renewal assist with public buildings or affordable housing, but obviously that's plenty of further discussion needs to happen there, and also boundary amendments and obviously project activities as well. Real fast, with the Clackamas Community College, we heard that the college is actually projecting growth rates in keeping with the city and the district at the moment. And similar to the school district, there's actually a state program that pretty much equalizes revenue for all colleges in Oregon. So really, they're not as impacted as perhaps other taxing districts are. But generally, they're interested in community amenities and largely involved in growing employment. So how urban renewal can play a role in supporting those goals include things like infrastructure, access, and connectivity. Moving forward into the town halls, I think largely everybody has been a part, or most of you have participated either as a host or in the three town halls for the other commissioners conducted thus far. But really the conversations at the moment have had reasonable participation. We've had some good discussions. Everything has been uploaded to the website with recordings, so they're all accessible to the public. But they've centered on things like the timeline, what kind of amendments might look like, both to the boundary and the project list, what those amendments really mean, and what the district's resources currently are. Could the city utilize them for projects going forward if it decided that was a tool that they wanted to use? So on the right there, you can just see the remaining three. We'll have those wrapped up in the next 2 weeks. There's been one other thing that I just wanted to reiterate, and this is my last slide. I won't go any further, so I can open this up to discussion. But we wanted to make sure that, let me backtrack, sorry, I apologize. One thing that's popped up is perhaps like this discussion of a vision for the district, and whether that district's vision or the district's vision rings true today. So there are some goals, some pretty high level vision statements in the original plan, and so one of the key considerations and points of discussion going forwards will be, are these applicable today? Do they need changing and or addressing? And if it is a tool that proceeds going forward. So as I said, we're in the let me go back here. We're in the transitioning to another phase, which is really like getting some more detailed feedback, and then we'll be shifting into how to get it, planning for that shift. What kind of financial analysis, what kind of things should we be considering doing as consultants based on the feedback of you all and the city. So that's all. Andy, anything to add to that?
No, thanks, Sam. I guess I would be curious to hear from commissioners who are in the room right now and who have done one of these town halls, if they had any reflections or feedback on how those went for them.
certainly do. Understand that we as commissioners are very cognizant of public meeting laws, so we have coordinated our attendance so that no more than two of us are ever in one of your meetings together. I'm curious, I know the first meeting, I think the participants and presenters outnumbered the civilian attendees. I've not attended the others for the public meeting law reasons. What kind of public attendance have we gotten in terms of numbers? Is it 4? Is it 10? I actually think it's quite small.
Like
and
4 or
I'm
5
not
total, yeah,
4 or 5.
I think.
Yeah, I'm not casting aspersions. I actually felt the most valuable part of the report was the overlapping taxing districts and their input. That was very telling. There's something I'd like Mr. Brookham to look into in depth because it's been on my mind. One of the bullet points you put up was the waterfront and easement. And I really would like to see, I believe we're allowed to expand the district by 1%, which is something shy of 9 acres expansion. I want to look into the waterfront, the easement component. How big is it? What are the legal aspects of maybe trying to expand the district to include that? How do we, given the ownership of it or whoever the easement belongs to, which I think is Metro, or maybe everybody, what's the implications of urban renewal getting involved in that? And what's the implications if we should choose to get involved with the land owned by the tribes of the Grand Ronde, especially if they were to choose at a future point to exercise their tribal sovereignty? Those are very in-depth legal questions. If you could take some time to look into those ahead of time, at some point, I personally would like the answer to that.
Certainly.
If you care to respond, you can. If not, it's okay.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a common theme that is coming up. The waterfront property has generally been the focus of attention in terms of boundary amendment discussions. I think an important distinction there is that, yes, you are allowed to expand the district boundary by 1%, but you could actually get more than 1%, as long as you are not exceeding the total boundary. And that's a really bad way of saying that. But anyway, if you wanted to add more than 9 acres, you could just take more than 9 acres away from the existing boundary. That's all I can say.
And I would say that differs from a previous answer when I asked if I subtracted, say, an additional 10 from the existing boundary. When I asked it, my understanding last time was that does not allow me to put an additional 10 into a new component. So you're saying whatever I take out, I could add back, I could actually move it as long as I could get my 1% plus I could maybe get whatever additional that I've removed from the existing?
Yes,
My understanding.
Okay, that
is correct.
that's my.
Okay, that's different than my understanding of our first meeting.
I apologize if I misconstrued an answer there, but yeah, that is correct.
That's fine. Commissioner Rocky Smith, I saw your hand up.
So, and I haven't looked at the map again since I asked this question the last time, but in one of our meetings, when I looked at the map, there was a long string of property that goes up South End Road. And I questioned whether or not that was a mistake or if that really was part of the urban renewal district going all the way up South End Road. And since South End Road is not even a city road, I can't remember the rationalization for why South End Road was part of the urban renewal district. So unless I understand why that really is, that might be a place where, is taken off and added to add more space. I don't know, but I'm sure there was a reason for South End Road, and I can't remember what that was.
That was a surprise to me as well.
So it goes all the way up South End Road, and I think that's interesting. So we should look at that if we have to get into that question.
Andy just raised his hand.
Andy, acknowledging you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think my recollection of why that boundary, extended to the south was related to transportation improvements on that road to be able to expend public dollars or renewal dollars to make those improvements in that particular area if that was desired, as well as facilitate additional expansion into that Blue Heron area in the future, should that be something, again, desired.
And while you're on,
Yeah.
can you confirm that actually if I can expand the existing district by 1%, but in addition to that, if I were to reduce the existing district by 10 acres, I could expand it elsewhere by that additional 10 acres?
Yeah, I think what Sam's indicating is correct. I'm going back in while you're talking and I'll, double check on the ORS and have just a confirmation for you on that. But I believe that, what Sam's indicating, we've looked at that. I believe that's the right interpretation.
Well, that's a very key point, especially in view of this conversation of the area that Commissioner Rockensmith just mentioned. Okay, anything further from our commission members in chambers that I cannot see? Okay, anything further by any remote attendees?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was most interested in obviously reading the report, and I'll say for the record that I attended the first two urban renewal town halls, and I will say that while the quantity wasn't there, the quality was certainly there, if I don't say so myself. So I'm going to put that on the record.
Is that because you attended?
Yeah, that's because she was there.
That's because absolutely, yes, and Commissioner Lyle Smith. I mean, I'm giving us some props here. Let's pat ourselves on the back.
Okay.
I was very interested in seeing sort of the summaries of the other taxing districts. Number one, I would like to start out by requesting that we immediately begin having outreach with the fire district. And the reason that I am saying this comes from two standpoints. Number one, during my tenure with my neighborhood association, we wanted regular updates from them like we get from the police department, and it was a little bit like pulling teeth to get them to come to our meetings. So I have some experience with trying to coerce them to participate in the community more, and I think that they should. So I'm hoping that we can, as a commission, start engaging them. Let's just say I was disappointed and not disappointed in the comment, because the last time we got comments from them regarding urban renewal, they were very negative about it. And I attributed that primarily to the fact that there was not a really good understanding of what it does and how that it can be beneficial. But I will say, just in commenting overall, the comments back from some of the districts were the fact that they only look at it from the standpoint of the highest ROI. And I don't think that that is really the overall goal of urban renewal. I would say that there are benefits and opportunities of an urban renewal district that are not solely based on the highest return on investment. And ultimately, urban renewal comes down to providing a quality of life and livability for our communities. And if those projects can meet those goals, as well as bring in a return on investment, I think we have a win-win. But it's not about, and this is going to be planning sacrilege, but it is not about the highest and best use. And that concept has gone out the door. It's just, that is not valid anymore. And urban renewal funds were used to restore the historic firehouse City Hall, and it's more than likely that it could be used for that purpose again. We've had street improvements that don't bring any ROI but benefit the community immensely by alleviating traffic congestion and things of those sorts. So I see that the districts have a lot of latitude on what community benefit is, and it definitely isn't always about the highest return. So I think that's something that we need to, we are talking to our community about it, and I think it's really important. Livability has a lot to do with why people come to a community. Quality of life have a lot to do with why people come to a community. They don't come to a community because there's a lot of traffic and congestion and no parking. They don't come to your town because of those reasons. So we have to look at a way to help our partners understand that there are mitigating circumstances by which we would use that tool as a benefit to everyone, not just the fact that it's, the highest and best use. So that was kind of what I took from reading the summary, and I really I appreciate that. I'll be interested to see what comments you get from the Port of Portland, and I'll be interested in seeing the summary from the Clackamas Community College. So I saw that you did outreach to some of the board members of the school district, but there wasn't a lot of narrative there. So was that the same with the community college board members, or that hasn't happened yet?
Yes, and we actually tried to get the board members involved in the discussions with staff as well, best we could. And we were scheduled to have a board members present for the Clackamas Community College, but they were invited. We scheduled it, but they didn't show, unfortunately. But we did have the fire district, Marilyn, her last name is escaping me, but board of directors, she was a part of that conversation, and one of the other districts had a board member present as well. I will say that I think it'll be an important discussion to have with the Clackamas County Board, and we included some notes in for them, because they are expecting to have their board shift a little bit in January. So the incoming board is likely to have some differing views on it.
But they have urban renewal. They are utilizing it, obviously, in the town center. So let me just get one more clarification, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So the school district, did you have any board members that were available? The only reason I'm asking is I had received contacts from at least 3 of them who were very interested in having a discussion, and if they weren't able to attend that one, would we have an opportunity to send them sort of a direct invite for the next several that they could chime in, at least on the forums that are coming up with Commissioner Neely and Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith? Because I'm getting the feeling from them that they're not getting a lot of communication from their staff. They said, oh, we didn't even know anything about it when I mentioned it to them 2 months ago. So.
We heard from the school district that their board would welcome a conversation, but the staff said they had lots on their plate, and it's challenging to get them, in the same room or on a.
Well, could we do a separate invite to them, board members, just letting them know when the next meetings were, and that we would strongly encourage their participation? They don't all have to be on the same call. They could be, individually or whatever. Thank you. Thank you for at least giving that a shot, because, I don't want anybody to say, well, we didn't get invited when, yeah, we did invite you. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is the time to speak up and present your case, whatever you may be. I kind of agree with much of what Commissioner McGriff said as far as comments by the fire district. I found one. I'm not sure I agree with the financing of public buildings and I think that's a discussion as compared to other things. I did find it interesting that one of the municipalities occasionally resets the base, which frees up that which you've accrued to date to go into the taxable income for them. But I think there's discussions to be had. I'll kick it back to the whole group president. Does anyone else need to make any further comments before we move on to prior agendas?
We do have a citizen comment on this agenda item.
Okay, please allow that person to make their comment.
William Gifford.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my name is still William Gifford, and I still live in Oregon City. After having listened to this presentation, I have some additional perspectives. but comes down to about three of them. One is, I heard Mr. Brookham use the phrase respectable participation in the town halls. And I'm just suggesting that's a pretty low bar. When I thought one of the purposes for the town hall meetings was to educate the community about what urban renewal was and how it worked. Months ago, I mentioned to this board that I thought that was pushing water uphill. That for the most part, most citizens in this city don't care about urban renewal. They don't care about it because it's a complicated subject and they don't want to invest the time to learn how it works. Secondly is, it doesn't affect their pocketbook. It doesn't affect their property taxes, despite what it says on their property taxes. We all know that that's just an accounting technique, but it does not affect what comes out of their pockets. And what they wind up with is improvements to their city. So there really isn't a big incentive, I think, for most people to try to, spend another hour, watching another Zoom presentation and trying to understand a complicated subject. And I'm just concerned that we are spending a lot of money and there's no way out of that now. I mean, we've already made the commitment, but I'm not pleased on the efficacy of this effort. I also was surprised that later on this timeline that the consultants are planning a joint meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and DOCA. And I was just kind of surprised that the Oregon City Business Alliance was not included in that conversation. I suspect that the OCBA knows a lot more about urban renewal than the Chamber of Commerce, a lot more. And so I'd suggest that they consider extending an invitation to that. My last comment is, and full disclosure, I sit on the Fire District's Budget Committee. I sit on the school boards, or the Oregon City School District's Bond Oversight Committee, and I sit on the Clackamas Community College Bond Oversight Committee. So I feel like I have some knowledge of some of the things that are going on. And I know that I have been working for a number of years, Commissioner McGriff, to nudge the fire district into a more accepting attitude of some issues of urban renewal. And I've had many in-depth discussions with them, and I do feel like they are moving along. And so far as participation, when Hillendale Association and Tower Vista were having their meetings, they would come to almost every meeting. It was, whether we asked them or not, they showed up. It was a lot of participation, and I think that can be ameliorated.
Oh, yeah. Well, they came when you were chair of M&A.
Maybe it's me.
It just might be you. But yeah, they've received an invitation every time to come, so.
I'll remind them.
Yep. We like those guys. They're great.
Before you exit, Mr. Gifford, you know that I think the OCBA monthly presentations are effective. Have you been getting good attendance to those on the Zoom meetings?
Better than I would have imagined. Much better, and it's consistently growing more and more.
Do you think that would be a venue that we'd want to use to do the urban renewal presentation?
I would be more than happy to entertain that with our board. We did one about 2 or 3 years ago. I know that Mayor Williams was in attendance with that. We had a very professional presentation. That's available on our YouTube channel. I'd be happy to share that. But insofar as having a new one with some fresh eyes, I think that would be a good idea. I mean,
I will say I found myself for the second time in the evening in total agreement with what you've said.
I think our last Zoom meeting, we had 70 people registered, which is a pretty good, I mean, for middle of the day.
Well, be effective. And I don't know if Sam and his group would,
He's got his hand raised.
consider that as an alternative. Who does?
Sam had his hand
Oh.
raised.
Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you.
Jared,
Thank you. So firstly, we are actually targeting the January Business Alliance meeting. Apologize if I left that off the schedule earlier, but that will be our official second community group meeting presentation, rather. The second thing I wanted to mention is just
Excuse me, that's not clear. That's not clear, Sam.
Sure.
We meet on the fourth Tuesday of every month. Are you, except for December, are you expecting that's what would be the presentation for this Tuesday? I mean, the fourth Tuesday in January? Looks like James has an answer for that.
We've been in contact with Kent Ziegler, to discuss, possibly having, this presentation made before the group in conjunction with, the city manager's presentation that occurs in January traditionally. So we've been in discussions with that, so we're just trying to, solidify it.
That's good. We're having our annual retreat our Friday week, and so we'll discuss that as well.
Very good. As chair, I would highly recommend if we can do that, please do.
I interrupted Sam, however. Excuse me.
Sam.
I wanted to just quickly reiterate the original purpose of our town hall meetings with commissioners. They aren't necessarily an official presentation. We certainly understand and appreciate, especially during these times, that we don't want to give anybody Zoom fatigue and be presenting week in, week out.
Too late.
So it's really an opportunity for people to drop in and ask questions. Typically it would be an open office hour with each of the commissioners. This is really the alternative in a remote setting. So we're not actually making formal presentations during these town hall meetings. So in terms of the participation and the single numbers, yes, it is low. But it's really an opportunity for people who do have specific questions to drop in and out as needed.
Well, I think your presentation this evening would be just dandy as part of one of our forums.
I personally feel as chair that the function of this whole contract was to engage the public and educate them. The short presentation Mr. Brookham gave would be a kickoff, open it up for questions. Our duty in this expenditure was to get public engagement and input. So I still would encourage it, not as an hour-long presentation, but as a short presentation and open for questions by people whose support would be invaluable.
I think our board would be amenable to that. I'll confer with them. Anything else I can help with?
No, thank you, sir. I'll comment further that the people that strongly oppose urban renewal have not been enamored with this effort. And I think reaching out to a group of 70 or so would be helpful. What those same people want, those that are usually strongly oppose urban renewal, is they want a project. They're prepared to set aside their objections on a project-based approach. So I just want to put that forward. I see Mr. Neely's hand up in the background. Chair recognizes Mr. Neely.
I think if I heard him right, I'm going to correct one statement. There are a lot of people that believe if the urban renewal district closed, their taxes would decrease.
Yeah, if we can convince them of that, that'll be a step in the right direction.
Okay, well, I believe we've covered this to the extent that we need to tonight. I thank Mr. Gifford for his multiple inputs.
Mr. Parks had his hand up.
I couldn't hear you, sorry.
Oh, Andy Parks, yes.
Oh, Mr. Parks, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for you on the question of the 1%. There's two different thresholds that the district is going to be faced with. One, in the 1%, that, Sam is speaking to is specifically in the plan, and it's a threshold that would put the plan through a substantial plan amendment if you exceeded 1% addition of land, based on the existing area. So taking some area out, adding more area in, but not increasing it by more than 1% in total will keep you below the substantial plan amendment threshold. You get above that 1%, you're gonna be dealing with substantial plan amendment, which deals with a lot of additional, public process and so forth. If you wanted to get above, that 1% number, we would go back to, ORS 457, which allows you to increase by no more than 20% of the existing boundary.
Okay, now you're gonna have to explain that 20% figure, because we were talking about if we took out 10%, do we get the 1% plus an additional 10%? So what's this 20% figure? And I understand the difference between not having to go into a major revamp or not. So could you explain this 20% figure, unless I'm the only one?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the 20% figure is the maximum amount allowed by state statute to the original plan area. So if you had 100 acres, you could add 20 acres and be within the statute. The plan that was adopted back in 2007 puts a threshold of 1% before it becomes a substantial plan amendment. So you can make what is effectively a minor plan amendment that requires little public process, just tweaking of lines and so forth within that 1% number, without, again, the additional land use processes. But you do have the ability to go all the way up to 20% addition, but then you're gonna fall again under the substantial plan amendments.
Okay.
But what we haven't, really looked into is what exactly does that entail? Does that end up with impacting a number of other constraints, limitations that have been imposed by the state legislature subsequent to the original passing of the plan or adoption of the plan? Things like tax limitations, revenue sharing of tax collections above a certain threshold, those types of things. If you win a substantial plan amendment, would it trigger those in which ones?
And does it trigger an adjustment of the original tax base too?
Right, all those things would have to be looked at.
I would invite you to do that. This is a timely moment to do that. And I would also restate, I'm interested in the involvement of either trying to use urban renewal money in this easement, or the potential of using urban renewal money in what could potentially be tribal lands that they could assert their sovereignty. What are the dangers there? So there's three major questions now posed before your group. Now we're running very late. I'm gonna conclude this unless somebody has any last minute inputs.
I just had a question for you. You're talking about the Riverwalk easement, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You just used a different word and I wasn't sure what we were talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I got something.
Mr. Neely?
I would like to see at the next meeting to revisit the quiet zone issue and the property on 10th and Washington.
Is there consensus of the commission?
I don't know
What
what
do you
property
mean?
we're talking
Well,
about.
you had a discussion, this before I came on the commission, but I attended the meeting about, you indicated you were sort of opposed to a quiet zone, but there was no real discussion about that particular issue, whether you want to go ahead and pursue the quiet zone or not. And the 10th and Washington piece had to do with whether that could function as a mixed-use building if there were no quiet zone. And that's what I'm suggesting. And back, my concern is those properties have been in the urban renewal district for a long time. And I want to see us sell them.
You're talking about the retirement, the Oregon City Group Home at 10th and
10th.
Washington?
Oh, I meant.
10th and Main,
10th
right
and
across
Main.
from
I was
the.
gonna say, I didn't think that.
No,
Okay,
sorry,
thank
10th
you.
and
That's
Main.
why I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay, because that's zoned R 3.5,
10th
and they
and Main.
can't do
10th and Main.
that type of development there,
Yeah,
so.
that's right.
Okay,
Sorry about
all
that.
right, that's okay.
Yeah, I moved out of that neighborhood and forgot everything.
I know. We miss you.
I actually felt the discussion on the quiet zone was quite extensive. The roadblock was $2 million. The roadblock was the current state of affairs with urban renewal.
Right.
I don't know.
Finished it.
I thought we covered it. Maybe we could do a one-on-one with Mr. Neely and bring him up to date and then discuss if there's something further he wants.
Oh, no, I got the impression that was all in question because of
No.
what Commissioner Lyle Smith mentioned, that she felt that there was no tax value, increment tax value associated with the quiet zone itself at that meeting.
Well, I don't think that would be an accurate statement. I do recall this saying that maybe the timing was an issue, that if the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde were to build a hotel on their land, they may see value in participating in that. So it was a lengthy discussion. I'm not ready to bring it up, but I'll defer to others. Otherwise, bring Mr. Neely up to date.
Yeah, I think
Mr. Rocky.
we talked it to death.
Well, this commission may not be willing to bring it back at this point, but I promise you, it's coming back. This conversation is something that we're going to have. And even with my conversation this evening with our economic development director, that is a big piece. Now, whether we find a place other than where we find the money is a different conversation, but that conversation's not going away.
So noted. Any further comments before we move on to approval of the prior agendas?
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes of September 8th and June 17th.
Oh, sorry, it's October 21st.
Oh, okay. I didn't get the updated agenda. I'm reading off the agenda.
Second.
Can we do that by consensus vote, Katie, or no?
Yep.
Okay.
We can. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes.
Any last communications by anyone?
No, sir.
Seeing none, I'm sorry, I couldn't see. Was there someone that wanted to
No,
speak?
there was a no.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a 10-minute break and re-adjourn this normal commission meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.